Today we'll be going over Chapter 34, the origin and evolution of vertebrates. We'll be going over a quick crash uh, course video. We'll be covering over 85 slides, so this will be over 30 minutes, of course. So we'll try to go as fast as we can. I'll try to cover most of it. So the chordates, which include us, are bilaterian animals that belong to the clade of animals known as the pterostomia. With pterostomia, we are the pterostomes because the blastopore forms the anus during development. So we belong in the chordata, which are animals that have a backbone. And chordates comprise all vertebrates into two groups of invertebrates called the urochordates and the cephalochordates. So here is our whole chordata family. We are in the amniotes or tetrapods. We also call tetrapods. We also call amniotes or mammalia. So our sister group is the echinodermata, which is our starfishes and our sea urchins. The notochord, everyone has a notochord, which is important. So chordates have four distinct characteristics. They have the notochord, the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the pharyngeal slits or clefts, muscular post-anal tail. Sometimes these traits are lost during embryonic development, as they progress through embryonic development or adulthood, but all chordates have to have at least two or more of these characteristics during the embryonic stage. So here is our base template of chordates. Here we have the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the notochord, the post-anal tail, not the mouth, and the pharyngeal slits or clefts. So talking about the notochord. So the notochord is a longitudinal flexible rod between the digestive tube and the nerve cord. So it provides skeletal support through most of the length of a chordata. So it acts as a skeleton, which the muscles can work against, a hard surface for the animal can work its skeleton, it can work its muscles against. Remember, jellyfishes have a hydrostatic skeleton. It uses water to push against, to use its cells or its body to push against to move. Same with worms, with earthworms. Earthworms have a hydrostatic skeleton, which their muscles would push against. It has to have that hard surface to push against to move. And most vertebrates, a more complex jointed skeleton develops, and the adult retains only remnants of the embryonic cord. So the notochord is reduced in humans. It forms the cartilage discs in our vertebrae. The dorsal hollow nerve cord is a hollow nerve cord that forms the brain and the central nervous system, the spinal cord and the brain. It does not form the peripheral nervous system. Just remember that, because people get confused a lot. And it is a plate of ectoderm, which forms the integumentary system and the CNS, or the central nervous system. So it rolls into a tube like a tortilla and it forms the CNS. Pharyngeal slits or clefts. So these pharyngeal clefts are present, and these clefts form various parts of the chordate. So a cleft will turn into pharyngeal slits, which is an open to the outside of the body used for gas exchange or used for absorbing oxygen in fish. So sometimes these pharyngeal slits have a function of suspension feeding. In many invertebrate chordates, gas exchange, except with limbs and the tetrapods, and they develop into parts of the ear, neck, and head in tetrapods. So here is our embryo. So every chordate has an embryo that looks just like this, or very, very, very similar. And the embryo has to have, all or most of the characteristics, such as the hollow dorsal nerve cord, pharyngeal slits or pouches, the notochord, and the post-anal tail. If you have seen in some health science classes or in some medicine classes, you have seen this. Like, this is an embryo. This is a baby, a pre-baby. This is before the fetus. This is an embryo. And this embryo looks exactly the same in an ox, in a cow, in a snake, in a rhinoceros. It's they're all exactly the same, so that means that this is a characteristics derived from a common ancestor. And these pharyngeal pouches will form into a human's maxilla jaw, hyoid bone, which is allowed for talking, our trachea, and things like that. So the cephalochordata or lancelets are marine suspension feeders that retain characteristics of chordate body plans as adults. So here is our suspension feeder lancelet. They have all four characteristics present in adulthood. The atrium, pharyngeal slits, not atrium, that's not part of it. The pharyngeal slits, notochord, dorsal hollow nerve cord, and a tail. So these pharyngeal slits are covered in mucus to capture food, and these pharyngeal slits have cilia, which push in that food into the digestive tract of the animal. So, yeah, pretty much it. Just a quick mention of the post-anal tail, since we practically skipped over it, is that these post-anal tail is greatly reduced in many species. Some species like the cats or monkeys, things that have a tail that is not removed. It's not reduced or gone completely. So they have many uses for that tail, which is for balance or whatever they use it for. And the tunicates, or the urochordata. The tunicates most resemble chordatas during their larval stage. So here is our larval tunicate. It looks almost exactly just like that. And they lose a lot of the characteristics during adulthood. And the pharynx, which is the pharyngeal with slits, is developed from this one. So they lose all of this, and they keep this. So pretend this is like a filtration system. If you ever been backpacking or you have been camping and you use one of those devices that you can like sip dirty water and sip dirty water, and what you get is clean water in your mouth. So here is an incurrent siphon which water flows. So water with food particles are filtered. The food particles will be stuck to the various filtration slits, and those food particles that are stuck will move towards the stomach, be broken down, be absorbed by the intestines, and excreted out through the anus by the excrement siphon. So it's just almost like a sponge. And these sea squirts are also called sea squirts, shoot water through the excrement siphon when threatened. So early chordate evolution. So ancestor chordates may have resembled lancelets. Not exactly like lancets, but it may have looked like a lancelet. Maybe a little tweaks or little primitive structures here and there, but they resemble because of their genes. So here is the brain of a vertebrate embryo and a nerve cord nascent embryo, and these are the genes that control the expressions of many structures. So we have OTX genes, BF1 genes, and HOX gene, which forms the hindbrain and parts of the midbrain, and the OTX forms the forebrain and the BF1. Many of the brain of vertebrates have multiple copies of HOX genes, which allows for more complex structures. Since lancelets and tunicates have only one copy of HOX genes, they are not that complex as us because we have multiple copies of HOX genes, which allows us to become more sophisticated. A lancelet does not have hands, or a lancelet does not have a well-developed brain like we do. So the neural crest, here is our notochord, and here is our neural tube. So when this closing neural tube closes, these migrating neural crest cells will migrate to different parts of the body or to different sites of the embryo and they form unique anatomical structures, unique to vertebrates. So they're unique to vertebrates, but not to other invertebrates or to other like sponges and peripera, um, platyhelminths, all that kind of stuff that's not a vertebrate. And these neural crests will form parts of the jaw, parts of the sphenoid bone, the zygomatic arch, things like that. So there's two types of vertebrates. There's jawless and jawed vertebrates. So there's fossil evidence that the earliest vertebrates lacked jaws. So these two the hagfishes and lampreys lack a backbone, but they have a rudimentary vertebrae. Another word, they have a cartilage rod that is used for, it's like a makeshift vertebrae. So hagfishes and lampreys have a rod of cartilage formed by the notochord that they use for movement. It's kind of like their vertebrae, rudimentary, makeshift vertebrae. So lampreys and hagfishes form a clade of living jawless vertebrates called the cyclostomes. And hagfishes are jawless vertebrates that have a cartilaginous skull, reduced vertebrae, and a flexible rod of cartilage derived from the notochord. They have small brains, ears, eyes, and nasal opening, and tooth-like formations in their mouth. So here is our hagfishes, and they secrete a lot of slime to deter competitors and predators. Lampreys are parasitic, and sometimes they are free-living species as larvae, but as they mature, they will reproduce and die within days. They have a notochord and a cartilaginous skeleton. Here's our lampreys. If you see a little fish with a little hole, that means a lamprey was snacking on him. So gnathostomes are vertebrates that have jaws. So vertebrate skeleton evolved as a structure made from unmineralized skeletons. We are gnathostomes because we have jaws. Since gnathostomes outnumber jawless vertebrates, it's because we are more successful in capturing food, because we can literally bite into food, we can bite somebody in a fight. Natural selection favored gnathostomes over jawless vertebrates. So gnathostomes include sharks and their relatives, ray-finned fishes, lobe-finned fishes, amphibians, reptiles, including birds and mammals. So where do these jaws come from? Well, they are modified skeletal rods, and there's one hypothesis that these gill slits that were supported by skeletal rods were modified into the jaw, which is the maxilla and what was it called? The mandible. I believe it's called the mandible. I think what you call the mandible. The mandible and the maxilla, which is on top, they formed via these rods. Other characteristics of gnathostomes is a complete genome duplication, including a duplication of Hox genes, an enlarged forebrain. Remember, because Hox genes, since there's a number of Hox genes present, we have an enlarged forebrain associated with enhanced senses of vision and smell. A lateral line system, which is a row of organs sensitive to vibrations, and they are found in aquatic gnathostomes. Chondrichthyes, chondrichthyes have a skeleton composed primarily of cartilage, and they include sharks, rays, and their relatives. They are the most diverse groups of chondrichthyes. And, wait, I just said that. And they have skates. So skates are similar to rays, but complete different species. And there's a second group is composed of a few dozen species of ratfishes and chimaereas. So here is our shark. The dorsal fins are used for stabilization. Pectoral and pelvic fins are used for moving, like turning left and right. So sharks have a streamlined body and are swift swimmers. Continual swimmers keep sharks from sinking. So they must keep moving, or they will just, if they don't, they'll just sink. And the largest sharks are suspension feeders, and most are carnivores. They have a short digestive tract with a spiral valve that increases surface area and slows down the passage of food. So, like a slide, if you've been to a slide, imagine if a slide was spinned up, coiled up really, really tight. It looks small, but if you stretch out that slide and remove all those spirals, there'll be a really, really long slide because of its high surface area. Acute senses including sight and smell, and the ability to detect electrical fields. So they're pretty cool. They attract and they smell and detect electrical fields, so they're kind of cool. And shark eggs are fertilized internally. Oviparous, which eggs hatch outside the mother's body. I'm going to let you read on these. Ovoviviparous, eggs are retained within the oviduct and the young are born after hatching within the uterus. And the for viviparous, the embryo develops within the uterus and is nourished from mother's blood through the placenta. So the cloaca is a common hole or a common exit hole that is used by three different systems: the excretory system, the reproductive system, and the digestive tract. And that hole that serves three uses is called the cloaca, which you will find in charts. Moving on to the next one. Ray-finned and lobed-finned fishes. Okay, so the vast majority of vertebrates are osteichthyes. Osteichthyes, okay, which nearly have a bony skeleton. So osteichthyes have a bony skeleton, and they include fishes, bony fishes, and tetrapods. We are tetrapods, I believe. We have fingers. Aquatic osteichthyes are vertebrates we normally call fishes. So fishes are octeichthyes. Most fishes breathe through by drawing water over the gills, protected by the operculum. Fishes control their buoyancy with an air sac known as a swim bladder, and they secrete mucus and is covered by flattened bony scales in most fishes. They have a lateral line system, and most species are oviparous, but some have internal fertilization and birthing. So here's our fish. Here's our lateral line system. Ray-finned fishes, or Actinopterygi. I should have googled this one. Actinopterygi include nearly all familiar aquatic osteichthyes. Ray-finned fishes originated during the Silurian period. These fins are supported by mainly long, flexible rays and are modified by maneuvering, defense, and other functions. So the tuna, the lionfish, and some other fishes, the common seahorses, have rays or bony structures. So here is our ray fin, the difference between lobe fin and ray fins. So rays, they have little long rays, while they have more bonier, thicker, in the lobed fin fishes. Important thing to mention is that lungs formed swim bladders. Just so you know, keep that in mind in case you are tested that lungs formed a swim bladder, which is used for buoyancy. So moving on to lobed fin fishes are also originated in the Silurian period, and they have rod-shaped bones surrounded by a thick layer of muscle and in their pelvic and pectoral fins. Coelacanths were thought to be extinct 75 million years ago, but then a living coelacanth was caught off coast of Africa in 1938. So these guys have lungs. Well, reduced lungs. Just so you know. Important thing to know between lobed fishes and ray fishes is that ray finned fishes do not have skeletal or muscle extensions or extending away from their body. So this guy is considered a sarco sarcopterygi, and they have muscle right here. They have a lot of muscle and bone, which are considered lobed fin fishes. Lungfishes, there's only 6 species of lungfishes, are found in the southern hemisphere, and their gills are the main organs for gas exchange, and they can also surface to gulp air into their lungs. So when these lungfishes usually live in places where there's fluctuating water levels. So perhaps there's a lungfish chilling in a pond or in a pond that dries up in the summer completely. You go find a lungfish there, and they usually breathe through their gills in water. But as the pond dries, and when it dries completely, they will literally breathe in air using water. But their the main organs of gas exchange are gills, so they have gills and lungs, and they will encoat themselves in a mucus. They'll bury themselves into the mud to prevent them from desiccating and drying up, and they'll continue breathing until the rainy season or the monsoon season comes, where it fills up the pond again, so they can breathe through their main organs, which is the gills. The tetrapods are third surviving lineage of lobed fins is tetrapods, a group that adapted life on land. So lobe fin to tetrapods were a major event. It was a major transition to aquatic to terrestrial. So they have 4 limbs with digits, a neck, an absence of gills, fusion of the pelvic girdle to the backbone. The pelvic girdle is just your pelvis, basically. Have you ever seen the pelvis? And there's all those different type of bones. Well, the pelvic girdle, all those bones fused into one major bone, which allowed for animals or organisms to jump, weight distribution, making them move, and allow them to distribute weight, making them more mobile in terrestrial habitats, and ears for detecting airborne sounds. So the origin of tetrapods. So the tetrapod body plan must have been modified from an existing one. So lobed fins in Devonian coastline wetlands could have used their lungs to breathe air and use their stout fins to swim or walk on water. So here is our Tiktaalik. So our Tiktaalik looks kind of like an alligator, but not really. Or a crocodile. It looks like an alligator. Oh yeah, it looks like an alligator. And these alligators or these Tiktaaliks have traits of fishes and tetrapods. So they're a transitional fossil. They have eyes on top of skull, flat skull, ribs, a neck, a wrist, which is kind of cool, and fins, scales, and gills and lungs. Traits shared with tetrapods but not fish include ribs to breathe air and support its body. Remember, ribs have intercostal muscles that allow our lungs to breathe, and neck and shoulders allowing movement for the head. If an animal, well, I could stay still, turn my head completely to the side without moving my whole body, allowing for allowing more more free movement without turning my whole head. Front fins with the bone pattern of a tetrapod limb. Pelvis and rear fin that are larger and more robust. Amphibians. So this is your little lizards, your Iridella, Anura, and Apoda. Salamanders, frogs, and cool things like that. So let's cover salamanders. So our Udella are our salamanders, Anura is our frogs, and Apoda are our limbless amphibians. Salamanders are amphibians with tails. Some are aquatic, but others live on land as adults or throughout life. I'm gonna go use the restroom real quick. Back. So our salamanders are amphibians with tails. They undergo paedomorphosis, which is retention of the juvenile features in sexually mature organisms. For example, a salamander would not, so an immature salamander would live mostly in water, and a terrestrial adult will live mostly in land. If the larva of a salamander lives in conditions where the terrestrial life is not suitable, it will become a paedomorph and it will be a paedomorph and it will sexually reproduce mature organisms. And if the larva lives in an aquatic environment, which is not successful, which is not susceptible to the paedomorph, it will turn into a terrestrial adult, which is can still reproduce and be viable. So a larva has if a larva has to choose between two lives, a paedomorph and a terrestrial adult, depending on the environments. So if the terrestrial environment is not suitable, the larva will turn into a paedomorph. If the aquatic environment is not suitable, it will turn into a terrestrial adult. So frogs are newer, lack tails, and have powerful hind legs for locomotion on land. Frogs with leathery sting are called toads, which tend to not be closely tied to water as other frogs. So Caecilians or Apoda are legless, nearly blind, and resemble earthworms. They are not snakes, and the absence of legs is a secondary adaptation. So they lost their legs. Does not mean that they are an early ancestor of Chordata. They just lost their legs. They had legs back then, but they lost it. They found them useless. They live underground and they lay eggs or give birth. The female has a layer of skin for nutrients that the young scrape off their skin, and Other females will have other females. Their young will eat their insides of females in the oviduct. So the lifestyle and ecology of amphibians. Amphibian means both ways of life, referring to aquatic larva and a terrestrial adult. So a frog is a tadpole, then there's the aquatic larva, and the frog, which is a terrestrial adult. So here is our larva, tadpole, metamorphosis, and then so on and so on. Amniotes, actually, most amphibians have moist skin that complements their lungs and gas exchange, and they are found in damp habitats. Fertilization is external, and some species may carry eggs on their skin, mouth, or back. Males and females care for their young. So amniotes. So this is where take in our amniotes. We are called amniotes. We still have a lot to cover. So they are strictly aquatic or strictly terrestrial, and we just went over that. So amniotes are a group of tetrapods whose living members are reptiles, including birds and mammals. Amniotes are named after their major derived character of laying the amniotic egg, which contains membranes that protect the embryo. So amniotes have these characteristics, which is the allantois, which is for metabolic wastes, are thrown in, like the trash bag. The chorion, where gas exchange occurs. The, what was it called? Amnion, cushion shock in the yolk sac, which is nutrients for the embryo. The amniotic egg was a key adaptation to life on land. It allowed the egg to prevent the embryo to desiccating more quickly. The amniotic eggs are most reptiles and some mammals have a shell. Amniotes and other terrestrial adaptations such as the relatively impermeable skin and the ability to use the rib cage to ventilate the lungs. Reptiles. Oh, just to mention that amphibians had to lay their eggs in water. Amniotes do not have to lay their eggs in water. The amniotic egg has fluids to keep the embryo moist and safe, and this cut the tie between water and land. Water can still escape amniotic eggs since they are permeable, so they have to be stored in a somewhat less drier environment, but they could still live on land. The sister group of amniotes is the amphibians, and the egg came first, not the chicken. So reptiles. Fertilization takes internally, have scales, waterproof barrier prevents desiccation or prevents them from drying up. And they are ectothermic, meaning that they absorb external body heat, and birds are endothermic, meaning that they gain their heat from metabolism. The tuatara are lizard-like reptiles and are restricted to small islands of the coast of New Zealand. They are threatened by introduced rats, which consume their eggs. The squamates. Squamates have movable eyelids found in lizards. Snakes were lizards which lost their legs. That's basically it, which are three genetic variant mutations of snake leg loss. So snakes do have vestigial bones of limbs. They are carnivorous, venom, and heat. They have heat detecting organs, making them literally observe their environment in infrared. And they have loosely articulated jawbones and elastic skin, making them swallow whole prey. Turtles. They have a box-like shell made of upper and lower shields of fused vertebrate clavicles and ribs. And somehow my notes are folded. And the earliest turtles could not retract their heads. They could have either tucked in their heads into the side, called the pleurodira, or completely retract their heads, called the cryptodira. Crocodilians, which is alligators and crocodiles, are restricted to warm regions. The derived characters of birds, many birds in adaptations that facilitate flight. A major adaptation is wings with keratin feathers. These weight-saving adaptations improve the efficiency to flight, include lack of urinary bladder, females with only one ovary and small gonads, and a loss of teeth. So they have lost most of these structures. They have small gonads, one ovary, a lack of a urinary bladder, and a loss of teeth to minimize weight, allowing them to fly. These guys have hollow bones, which allows them to reduce weight, and also if they fall, if those birds fall from flight, their bones will not completely shatter because it is not a strictly hard filled-in surface or a hard filled-in surface, a hard filled-in volume or a full volume of a bone. Worded that completely wrong. I'm trying to fly through all of this. I'm tired. The origin of birds. So birds probably descended from a group of small theropods, a group of carnivorous dinosaurs, and the coolest thing about this bird is called the Archaeopteryx, which is a feathered wings and retained ancestral characteristics such as teeth, claws, and a long tail. So the Archaeopteryx was not the first bird, but it was the early bird, or it was the pre-bird, or a transitional bird. Early feathers might have evolved for insulation, camouflage, or courtship display, and feathers were evolved long before were feathers came first before it powered flight. So feathers were either used for camouflage or courtship display. Living birds. So several groups of birds include one or more flightless species. The ratites are an order of flightless birds. Penguins use their powerful pectoral muscles to fly in water, and certain species of rails, ducks, and pigeons are also flightless. Finally, mammals. Mammals are the class Mammalia and are represented by more than 5,000 species of derived characters. So they have mammary glands, which produce milk, hair and fat layers for insulation, kidneys to conserve water from waste, endothermy, a high metabolic rate, efficient respiratory and circulatory systems, a large brain to body size ratio, extensive parenteral care, and differentiated teeth. So those are all the characteristics of mammals. Monotremes are a small group of egg-laying mammals consisting of echinidas and platypuses. So female platypuses lack nipples and they secrete milk. They secrete milk from their glands on their bellies, and the baby will suck the milk from the mother's fur. And male platypuses have these spurs, these venom spurs, to fight other males. Marsupials, these are my favorite. The embryo develops within the mother's uterus and is nourished by the placenta. These are our possums, our kangaroos. And it completes embryonic development while nursing in a maternal pouch called a marsupium. So if you have seen a possum with its pouch, it's called a marsupium. In Australia, convergent evolution, convergent evolution means same evolution path, but different type of species, has resulted in a diversity of marsupials that resemble the eutherians in other parts of the world. So eutherian mammals are animals that do not originate from Australia. So other other than Australia, marsupials are only found in North and South America. So marsupial, what was it again? Hold on, I think I got this wrong. I think I should skip this one. I don't think anything else. Placental mammals or eutherians, compared with marsupials, eutherians have more complex placenta. Young eutherians complete their embryonic development with a uterus joined to the mother by a placenta. The diversification of eutherians occurred about 60 million years ago. So they have a complex placenta, and the young embryo completes their embryonic development in the mother's uterus. So we are eutherians because the baby will continue to complete embryonic development in the mother's womb, or aka the uterus. So primates, 41 minutes, a few slides. Primates, which is our monkeys and apes and orangutans and all that kind of stuff, including us. Most primates have hands and feet adapted for grasping, flat nails instead of claws, a large brain, and short jaws. So opposable thumbs allowed us to grab things and learn. The forward-looking eyes close together allow depth perception, so you can see how far a thing is. For example, if you look at something in your room, you can say that your phone is closer to you than the water bottle across the room. You can perceive depth, which is the characteristics of primates. Living primates, there's three main groups of living primates are lemurs, tarsiers, and anthropoids. So our lemurs, lorises, and bush babies, these are one group. Tarsiers are these little weird looking ones, and our anthropoids, which are monkeys and apes. So the difference between a New World monkey and an Old World monkey is that Old World monkeys have a lack a prehensile tail, meaning that their tail is it doesn't have it doesn't move. Their nostrils open downwards, and New World monkeys have a prehensile tail, and their nostrils open to the sides. So New World monkeys are found in South America, and Old World monkeys are found in Africa. So how did a monkey end up in South America? It's a hypothesis where a monkey was maybe floating on a raft and somehow landed in South America. And it was a really, really, really luck. It was a small chance of that happening. And that monkey was so lucky that he lived life on South America. So apes. The other group of anthropoids consists of primates informally called apes. Apes diverged from old world monkeys about 25 million years ago. They have long arms, short legs, no tail, and a larger brain body mass to ratio. These are bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, gibbons, and gorillas. So that is it. Hope I covered most of it. 44 minutes. I believe our professor went over 1 hour. But goodbye, guys. See you in the next lecture.